The winter of 1944 hung heavy over the Italian coast. German aircraft prowled the skies above the Allied beachhead at Anzio, confident that darkness would shield them from American gunners. For months, the Luftwaffe had relied on night raids to frustrate Allied operations, using clouds and moonless nights as their cloak. Yet on the night of January 23rd, German pilots realized something was horribly wrong. Aircraft that should have been untouchable were suddenly being torn from the heavens with terrifying accuracy. Entire squadrons disintegrated in bursts of flak fire that found its mark in absolute darkness. To the stunned German survivors, it felt as though the Americans had learned to see in the dark. What they could not know was that the US Army had quietly deployed a new weapon that rewrote the rules of aerial combat, the SCR-584 radar system. Unlike older equipment, which relied on crude plotting and slow manual adjustments, this radar operated with mathematical precision. Mounted on a mobile trailer, it locked onto incoming aircraft automatically, tracked their movements across the sky, and fed targeting solutions directly to anti-aircraft batteries. It was the first time in history that technology, not eyesight, determined the outcome of an air raid. The Germans had no warning. Their intelligence services remained blind to the microwave frequencies on which the SCR-584 operated. Their detectors, tuned to longer wavelengths, simply could not sense it. To the Luftwaffe, it seemed as if American gunners had acquired superhuman reflexes, firing flak shells that detonated at just the right altitude, at just the right second. In reality, mathematics was pulling the trigger. By the end of that first week, the system achieved a staggering 58% kill rate against incoming bombers, an effectiveness no human gunner could ever dream of. The Luftwaffe, which had dominated Europe's skies in the early years of the war, suddenly found itself bleeding aircraft at a pace it could not replace. What began as a quiet technical deployment in Italy marked the beginning of a nightmare for German airmen, one that would spread across Europe in the months ahead. The world's deadliest skies had just met the world's most advanced eyes. The story of the SCR-584 did not begin on the battlefield, but in the quiet laboratories of American research institutions years earlier. By 1940, the U.S. military knew that the war in Europe would demand a revolution in detection technology. Britain's chain-home radar network had saved London during the Battle of Britain, but its long-wave design lacked precision for fast-moving aircraft. What the Allies needed was a leap into an entirely new frequency spectrum. That leap came from the radiation laboratory at MIT, where scientists, working with British counterparts, developed microwave radar. The key breakthrough was the cavity magnetron, a device capable of generating high-frequency signals powerful enough to penetrate the night sky with razor-sharp clarity. Unlike earlier radars that could only estimate an aircraft's general location, microwave radar could pinpoint altitude, speed, and direction with breathtaking accuracy. But innovation alone was not enough. The challenge lay in turning fragile prototypes into rugged battlefield machines. For this, the U.S. turned to industry. Chrysler Corporation, better known for building automobiles, was tasked with mass production. Within months, their engineers had transformed laboratory sketches into a mobile, self-contained radar unit mounted on a rotating turret. It weighed several tons, could be towed by a standard truck, and featured an antenna dish that automatically tracked aircraft once locked onto a target. The automatic tracking system was nothing short of revolutionary. For centuries, warfare had relied on human eyes, human reflexes, and human error. Now, for the first time, machines would calculate trajectories and feed firing data directly into anti-aircraft guns. To German scientists, who struggled with clumsy mechanical predictors and manual adjustments, such automation seemed impossible. They believed no country in the world could achieve it during wartime. Yet by 1943, America had done exactly that. The secrecy surrounding the SCR-584 was airtight. Only a handful of officers understood its true potential. To ordinary gunners, it seemed as though their weapons had suddenly become sharper, faster, and smarter. The truth was that Chrysler's assembly lines, producing thousands of units, had married cutting-edge science with industrial muscle. What emerged was not just a piece of equipment, but the foundation of a new era: automated warfare. Unseen by German eyes, a technological giant was awakening, one that would soon devastate the Luftwaffe's proud squadrons. In January 1944, Allied forces launched Operation Shingle, the amphibious landing at Anzio, Italy. For the men storming the beaches, the danger was not only German artillery, but also the Luftwaffe's relentless night raids. German pilots were confident that darkness remained their greatest ally. Yet on the very first nights, their certainty turned to disbelief. Unbeknownst to the Luftwaffe, several SCR-584 radar units had been quietly deployed near the beachhead, concealed beneath camouflage netting and surrounded by sandbags. Each mobile trailer carried not only its revolutionary radar dish, but also the critical connection to new automatic gun directors, the M9 predictors, that translated radar signals into precise firing data. Anti-aircraft gunners, many of whom had never before scored kills at night, suddenly found their weapons striking targets with near mathematical inevitability. For German pilots, the change was devastating. Bombers approaching in tight formations were ripped apart by flak bursts that exploded exactly at their altitude. Fighter escorts, attempting evasive maneuvers, discovered that random zigzags no longer worked. Even at 10,000 feet, shells seemed to follow them with uncanny precision. Survivors later recalled the eerie sensation that the sky itself was calculating their doom. The statistics confirmed their horror. In just a matter of days, the SCR-584 directed guns achieved a 58% kill rate against enemy aircraft. To put this in perspective, traditional searchlights and manual predictors had managed barely a fraction of that efficiency. What once required dozens of shells to bring down a single bomber now needed only a carefully timed salvo. On the ground, Allied soldiers noticed the change as well. For weeks they had lived under constant bombardment, sleeping in foxholes and trenches as German planes harassed them nightly. Now they watched in awe as flak guns, guided by invisible beams of radar, filled the sky with burning wreckage. Morale soared. Men who once cursed the Luftwaffe's freedom of the night began cheering as each enemy aircraft fell in flames. The Germans were baffled. Reconnaissance photos revealed no massive new guns, no mysterious batteries of searchlights. Yet their losses mounted, night after night, in skies they thought they controlled. They did not know it yet, but the balance of power in Europe's air war had just shifted forever. The dramatic success at Anzio proved the SCR-584 was not a laboratory experiment, but a battlefield game-changer. Within weeks, Allied High Command ordered more units rushed across the Mediterranean and into Western Europe. What had begun as a guarded experiment was now recognized as a strategic weapon equal in importance to tanks, bombers, or artillery. By spring 1944, convoys of Chrysler-built radar trailers were moving toward critical frontline positions. Each SCR-584 traveled with its rotating dish folded down, disguised under canvas, pulled by trucks through muddy roads and bomb-shattered towns. Soldiers tasked with guarding them often had little idea what they carried, only that the equipment was top priority. Behind the scenes, American commanders coordinated their deployment with painstaking care, ensuring that every major invasion or fortified position had access to this invisible guardian. The system's effectiveness grew even more once integrated into broader Allied networks. Telephone lines and portable radios linked SCR-584 trailers to nearby anti-aircraft guns, searchlight batteries, and even fighter interceptor command posts. For the first time, battlefields began to function as interconnected grids, where radar provided the eyes, predictors provided the brains, and artillery supplied the killing power. What emerged was nothing less than the birth of networked warfare. German pilots began noticing the results long before they understood the cause. Bombing runs against Allied ports in southern Italy became suicide missions. Reconnaissance planes sent over coastal regions vanished with chilling frequency. Luftwaffe crews, who once bragged of their ability to harass Allied ground troops under cover of darkness, now found themselves increasingly hesitant to fly at night. The Americans wasted no time spreading the system even further. By June 1944, As preparations for Operation Overlord reached their climax, no fewer than 39 SCR-584 units were assigned to the invasion force. On landing ships, in hedgerows and atop Norman cliffs, their rotating dishes scanned the skies, ready to swat down any Luftwaffe aircraft daring to challenge the landings. To the Germans, the beaches of Normandy seemed protected by some invisible wall of fire. What they could not see were the radar beams, silently sweeping across the sky, guiding shells with surgical precision. This invisible shield would prove decisive in protecting the largest invasion fleet in history. By the summer of 1944, Germany had unleashed a terrifying new weapon, the V-1 flying bomb. These pilotless jet-powered missiles, nicknamed buzz bombs for their distinct engine noise, screamed across the Channel toward London at over 350 miles per hour. Unlike conventional bombers, they carried no crew to fear Allied fire. If one was destroyed, another was launched. Day and night, wave after wave poured toward England, threatening to turn the city into rubble. At first, Britain's defences struggled. Anti-aircraft crews who had trained for years to target manned aircraft suddenly faced a weapon smaller, faster, and far harder to hit. Thousands of shells were wasted trying to bring down just one flying bomb. Londoners, already hardened by the Blitz, now endured a new kind of terror. The sudden silence when a V-1's engine cut out, signaling it was about to fall. Then came the SCR-584. When deployed along the southern coast of England, the radar system revolutionized the defense against this new menace. Unlike traditional radars, which could track only broad movements, the SCR-584's automatic tracking locked onto a V-1 as if it were tethered to the dish by an invisible thread. The moment a flying bomb entered its zone, the radar calculated its trajectory with cold precision and relayed exact aiming instructions to nearby anti-aircraft guns. The results were immediate and astonishing. Kill rates that had hovered around 3 or 4% skyrocketed to nearly 60% within weeks. Entire batteries that once exhausted their ammunition with little to show now became lethal guardians. In many sectors, V-1s were falling faster than Germany could launch them. The system proved so reliable that British commanders shifted their strategy. Instead of evacuating civilians from threatened areas, they trusted radar-guided guns to keep the sky clear. For Luftwaffe engineers, the sight of their proud new weapon being shredded before reaching its target was devastating. Months of work at Peenemünde could not keep pace with an American invention designed in secrecy and mass-produced with industrial might. Even worse, the SCR-584 showed that the age of pilot bravery was ending. Success in the skies no longer depended on skill or courage. It was mathematics, electronics, and machine precision that ruled. What had started as a miracle at Anzio was now rewriting the balance of power over Europe. On June 6, 1944, the largest amphibious invasion in history began. More than 5,000 vessels and 150,000 Allied troops converged on the beaches of Normandy. Every commander understood the invasion's greatest vulnerability. A sudden Luftwaffe strike could scatter ships, slaughter men on the beaches, and perhaps drive the Allies back into the sea. The Germans had not yet realized it, but by this time, the Allies possessed a secret weapon that made such a disaster nearly impossible, the SCR-584. In the weeks leading up to D-Day, American and British planners quietly positioned 39 of the radar units across southern England and newly liberated zones. Each was mounted on mobile trailers, concealed under camouflage nets, and guarded like crown jewels. To German reconnaissance, they appeared to be ordinary transport vehicles. In reality, they were the backbone of an invisible wall that would cover the invasion. When dawn broke over Normandy and German aircraft scrambled to intercept, the difference was immediate. Radar operators inside their mobile vans watched glowing dots appear on their screens, each representing a hostile aircraft. The SCR-584 locked onto targets within seconds, calculating speed and direction with mathematical certainty. Operators relayed data to nearby 90mm and 40mm anti-aircraft guns, which adjusted their angles automatically. German pilots expected confusion, perhaps a frantic barrage of blind fire. Instead, they flew straight into a storm of deadly accuracy. Within minutes, formations were shredded, planes spiraling into the channel before they could even reach the beaches. Reports from Luftwaffe survivors describe an eerie sensation. The Allies seemed to know exactly where they were, every second, as though guided by some unseen hand. By nightfall, the effectiveness of the SCR-584 was undeniable. Not a single major Luftwaffe raid penetrated the invasion corridor in force. The radar shield had functioned exactly as intended, guarding ships, soldiers, and landing craft from what should have been catastrophic attacks. Eisenhower later remarked that the invasion's success rested not only on courage and numbers, but also on the quiet brilliance of Allied technology that robbed the Luftwaffe of its last hope. The Germans had expected the Atlantic Wall to stop the Allies. Instead, it was an invisible wall of radar that shattered their defenses in the sky. For centuries, battles in the air had been seen as duels of skill, where bravery, instinct, and quick reflexes decided victory. The Luftwaffe clung to this belief in 1944. German propaganda celebrated its aces, men like Erich Hartmann and Walter Nowotny, as knights of the sky who could bend the outcome of battles through sheer talent. Yet when the SCR-584 entered combat, that heroic tradition collapsed in the face of mathematics. The radar's automatic tracking meant that once a German aircraft was detected, there was no chance to outmaneuver the defense. Loops, dives, feints, tactics that once saved a pilot's life, were useless. Gun sights no longer relied on human steadiness or intuition. Instead, servos calculated trajectory down to fractions of a degree. In effect, the American defense system had removed human error entirely. This technological revolution hit the Luftwaffe with devastating psychological force. Pilots reported that flak seemed intelligent, as if the sky itself had turned hostile. What unnerved them most was the consistency. Raid after raid, casualties mounted with chilling regularity. It was not luck, nor weather, nor superior Allied numbers. It was an invisible precision engine systematically grinding them down. Military intelligence intercepted letters from German airmen that revealed growing despair. "We fight not against men, but against machines," wrote one pilot after barely surviving a mission over northern France. "The sky belongs to mathematics, and it leaves no escape." For a force that once thrived on individual daring, this admission was catastrophic. Meanwhile, American gunners grew confident. Crews once trained to fire thousands of shells in a desperate curtain barrage now fired in controlled bursts, guided by radar plots. Fuel, ammunition, and manpower were conserved. Each German aircraft destroyed reinforced the message. Skill and courage had been dethroned by circuits and oscillators. Historians later argued that this shift marked the end of the Luftwaffe's golden age. By the summer of 1944, ace pilots could no longer influence the battlefield as they once had. Their victories, however dramatic, could not change the tide. Against a system that could track hundreds of aircraft at once and predict their every move, the age of the lone aerial hero was over. For the Germans, it was more than defeat in battle. It was the death of an entire way of war. By late 1944, German forces were desperate for answers. Reports of catastrophic aircraft losses could no longer be explained by Allied numbers alone. Something invisible and unstoppable was guiding anti-aircraft fire with uncanny precision. The breakthrough came not through espionage or science, but by accident, when German troops captured an intact SCR-584 unit during the Battle of the Bulge in December. Engineers rushed the system to research facilities in Berlin. When scientists examined the microwave circuits and automatic tracking features, disbelief quickly turned into resignation. The radar operated at 3 GHz, far beyond the range of German detectors designed for older, longer wavelengths. In effect, the Luftwaffe had been blind, unable to even perceive the frequencies that locked onto their aircraft. Worse, the automatic tracking function represented a leap they had not considered feasible for at least another decade. Technical reports submitted to the German Air Ministry were blunt. There was no chance of replicating or countering the technology in time. Even if resources had been available, which they were not, Germany lacked the industrial foundation to mass-produce such intricate devices. Tubes, precision parts, and high-frequency components required entire industries that had already been crippled by Allied bombing. What shocked the scientists most was not simply the sophistication of the radar, but the fact that it was being mass-produced by Chrysler, a civilian automobile company. While Germany struggled to keep its few prototypes alive in secret labs, the Americans had turned cutting-edge science into standardized battlefield equipment rolling off assembly lines by the thousands. The gap was not one of brilliance, but of scale, an industrial divide too vast to bridge. Captured documents later revealed the despair that swept through German command circles. Some Luftwaffe officers openly admitted that the discovery marked the end of any realistic chance of regaining air superiority. In essence, the Reich was not fighting a single enemy, but an entire industrial system capable of transforming theoretical concepts into battlefield dominance within months. For the men at the front, however, little explanation was needed. They had already felt the results: missions cut short, comrades lost in bursts of radar-guided fire, morale drained by the sense of helplessness. The December revelation only confirmed what they already knew in their bones. Germany was fighting a technological war it could never hope to win. June 6, 1944. The largest amphibious invasion in history was underway, as Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy. For months, German commanders had promised that the Luftwaffe would unleash chaos from the skies, breaking apart the fragile beachhead before it could expand. But when the moment arrived, their squadrons ran headfirst into a technological wall they never even saw. That invisible wall was the SCR-584 radar. The Allies deployed 39 of these systems specifically to shield the invasion fleet and landing zones. Each unit, paired with batteries of 90mm anti-aircraft guns, created overlapping zones of fire that were mathematically precise. Whenever German aircraft approached, the radar instantly locked on, directing guns without hesitation or human error. For Luftwaffe pilots, it felt like flying into a trap from which there was no escape. Accounts from German survivors described the terror vividly. Formations were broken apart before they could even dive. Bombers vanished in bursts of black flak that seemed to anticipate every maneuver. Veteran pilots who had survived countless missions in Russia or North Africa admitted they had never faced defenses so lethal. Some refused to fly over Normandy again after witnessing entire squadrons wiped out in minutes. The results were devastating. Out of the limited Luftwaffe sorties launched against the beaches, nearly half were destroyed before they could reach their targets. For the Allied soldiers on the ground, this absence of air attack was not immediately recognized, but historians now credit radar-directed flak with saving countless lives during those crucial first days. Without air cover, German counterattacks had no chance of pushing the Allies back into the sea. What made the difference was not just firepower, but efficiency. American radar officers calculated that with SCR-584 guidance, each anti-aircraft gun was 25 times more effective than under manual operation. The Luftwaffe was no longer facing gunners relying on eyesight and luck. It was facing machines performing equations in real time, reducing human skill to irrelevance. German intelligence had expected sabotage, weather, and fortifications to hinder the invasion. What they never anticipated was that their air force would be neutralized, not by Allied fighters, but by ground-based radars, turning mathematics into death. By the end of June, the Luftwaffe's dream of crushing the Normandy landings had dissolved, erased by invisible beams sweeping across the French coast. By the winter of 1944, the Luftwaffe was a shadow of its former self. Once the terror of Europe, its squadrons now faced annihilation every time they took to the air. German pilots had trained for duels of reflex and daring, but no amount of experience could counter invisible beams of microwave energy guiding Allied gunners with mechanical certainty. The SCR-584 had rewritten the rules of aerial combat without a single dogfight. Captured German officers struggled to comprehend what they were up against. When the Allies deployed their radar shield during the defense against V-1 flying bombs, Success rates soared above 85%. What astonished observers most was that these victories were not dependent on weather, moonlight, or pilot skill. The system worked with equal efficiency in fog, storms, or the dead of night. For an air force already crippled by fuel shortages, the realization that technology itself had rendered their doctrine obsolete was devastating. Even when examples of the radar finally fell into German hands in late 1944, scientists admitted they were years behind. They had focused their resources on massive fighter projects like the Me-262 jet, while ignoring radar miniaturization. The SCR-584 represented not just clever engineering, but a triumph of American industry. Thousands of skilled workers at Chrysler and MIT collaborating to mass-produce a system that Germany simply could not match. For Allied soldiers and sailors, the radar's legacy was deeply personal. Veterans remembered nights at Anzio or Normandy, when flak fire seemed to act with supernatural precision, saving their lives from bombing raids that never landed. The men operating the SCR-584 rarely received recognition, yet their invisible calculations altered the war as decisively as any tank battle or bombing campaign. When historians later asked German survivors what had broken their will to fight, many pointed not to overwhelming numbers of men or planes, but to America's ability to replace human frailty with mechanical perfection. Against radar, bravery meant nothing. The Luftwaffe's final advantage, its veteran aces, had been erased by technology. The SCR-584 radar stands as a quiet monument to the power of innovation. In a war often remembered for tanks, bombs, and fighters, it was a box of electronics on a truck chassis that silently decided the fate of skies over Europe. For Germany's pilots, the shock was total. For America, it was proof that victory in modern war belongs to those who master the unseen.